They say wars today aren't fought with bullets. They're fought with contracts, tariffs, and trade deals. And in 2018, the United States fired a shot that echoed far beyond any battlefield, straight through the supply chains of North America. When Donald Trump picked up that pen and slapped sweeping tariffs on Canadian agriculture, he wasn't just making policy, he was drawing a battle line. One that turned neighbors into rivals, allies into adversaries, and farmers into collateral damage. This is the untold story of how a trade war meant to boost American strength ended up cutting deepest into the heart of its own rural backbone. Let's break it down. At first glance, it looked like a power move. Under the bold banner of America First, Trump set his sights on what he called unfair trade practices by Canada. Dairy, wheat, lumber, industries deeply tied to Canadian identity were suddenly in the crosshairs. The rationale? Washington claimed Canadian producers were gaming the system. Subsidies, soft quotas, sweetheart deals under NAFTA. And while diplomats debated the numbers, Trump framed the issue in simpler terms. They're taking advantage of us. Tariffs were slapped on, fast, hard, no warning. Duties on Canadian dairy disrupted one of the most delicate supply chains on the continent. U.S. cheese processors, many of whom relied on Canadian milk proteins, scrambled for alternatives. Lumber shipments slowed to a crawl. Wheat from Saskatchewan got entangled in bureaucratic red tape. The message was loud and clear. The United States was done playing nice. But here's the catch. Canada didn't flinch. In fact, they hit back, and not with empty words. Trudeau's government, caught off guard but not off balance, launched a retaliation campaign that was as strategic as it was surgical. The Canadians knew exactly where to strike, not just economically, but politically. Their targets? Products made in the very states Trump needed to win re-election. Midwestern soybeans, Iowa pork, Wisconsin cheese, Ohio ketchup. These weren't just trade goods. They were pressure points, symbols of America's agricultural pride, and, more importantly, Trump's base. Canada's counterpunch wasn't scattershot, it was scalpel precise. It was a masterclass in geopolitical jujitsu, using America's own political weight against it. Suddenly, farm towns that had cheered Trump's tough talk started seeing contracts disappear. Buyers in Ontario and Quebec canceled deals. Grain sat unsold in silos. Corn rotted in the fields of Iowa. And the pain didn't stay economic for long. It turned emotional, personal. You see, for American farmers, this wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, legacy, generations of work and land passed down like sacred scripture. And now, that future was bleeding out in the dust. Dairy producers in Wisconsin watched profits collapse as Canadian buyers pivoted to Europe. Pork producers in Missouri stared at charts full of red arrows. And soybean farmers, already bruised by tensions with China, suddenly found their fallback market, Canada, slamming the door shut. The message was loud and clear. Frustration turned to fear. Then it boiled into fury. Some tried to stay loyal, clinging to the promise that short-term pain would yield long-term gain. But the silence from Washington was deafening. And when help finally came in the form of subsidies, many farmers didn't see support. They saw hush money. Meanwhile, Canada wasn't just retaliating. They were evolving. Behind closed doors, Canadian trade officials moved quickly to diversify. They cut new deals with the EU, strengthened ties with China, explored fresh routes with Latin America. No more single-buyer dependence, no more waiting on America's mood swings. Canada had been burned, and they weren't going to be caught off guard again. And as Ottawa opened new markets, the world watched. Countries that once depended on American wheat, soy, and pork began exploring other suppliers. Supply chains realigned, trade deals shifted. What once was a tightly coordinated North American trading system now looked more like a jigsaw puzzle, key pieces missing. And while Washington insisted the tariffs were working beautifully, the data told a different story. American exports dropped, farm bankruptcies rose, suicide hotlines for rural communities lit up, equipment dealers reported sharp declines, credit dried up, college funds vanished. This wasn't theoretical, this was survival, and for many, it was slipping away. Inside the White House, the mood shifted from swagger to scramble. Trump raged on Twitter, branding Trudeau weak and dishonest. GOP senators from farm states began breaking ranks, carefully at first, then openly. Agricultural lobbies demanded reversals, governors raised red flags, trade economists warned, once a market is lost, it's not easily won back. But Trump didn't back down. He doubled down. More tariffs, more bravado, more defiance, because backing down isn't part of the brand. And so, the damage kept spreading. Canadian shelves ditched Heinz for French's. Buy local campaigns surged. American goods were boycotted not out of hatred, but out of principle. What started as a trade dispute had become something deeper, a crisis of trust, a collapse in partnership. And here's the kicker. While America was tangled in its own rhetoric, the rest of the world moved on. Brazil stepped in with soy. Germany signed dairy agreements. China doubled down on Australian beef. America, once the center of the global trade map, found itself watching from the sidelines. This wasn't just a loss of deals, it was a loss of leadership, and maybe a loss of identity. Because when your strongest supporters are left behind, when your farmers feel sacrificed, when your allies begin hedging against your unpredictability, you're not winning, you're unraveling. Now, let's be clear, trade policy isn't simple. It's complex, it's messy, it's filled with loopholes, fine print, and national interest. But one thing is simple. In a globalized world, pride costs more than profit. You can't strong-arm a trading partner and expect them to wait around while you figure out the next move. You can't declare economic war and expect the battlefield to stay still. Canada didn't just survive the tariffs, they used them as fuel to redesign their future. And the United States? It walked away from one of the most stable, integrated, and peaceful trading relationships in modern history, with fewer allies, fewer exports, and a trail of broken contracts. This isn't about left or right. This is about cause and effect. And the question now isn't whether the tariffs worked, it's whether the damage can still be undone. So, what comes next? That depends on leadership, on listening, on whether Washington learns that real strength isn't in defiance, it's in strategy. Until then, rural America continues to pay the price, not with politics, but with crops, with cattle, with silenced towns, and fading futures. And as the world rewrites the rules of trade without waiting for the US to catch up, one thing is becoming clear. You can wave the flag all you want, but without trust, trade, and truth, there is no victory. Thanks for watching. If this episode sparked something in you, drop a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe, because the real conversation, it's just getting started.